Hey everybody, thank you for checking out this episode of the Insurance Agents Think Tank. I'm your host, Todd McLean, and don't forget you can check out this podcast at insuranceagentsthinktank.com. We have Jeff Hogue from QuoteWizard here with us today. Thank you so much for visiting and sharing your experience with our agents. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thanks for having me on the show. I'm really excited to get in front of an audience that I think both of us can bring value to. So a little bit about myself here. Again, I'm Jeff Hogue. I am the Director of Agent Sales at QuoteWizard. So my team is the team that is probably calling your office and talking about our services. I've worked at the company for 8 years. During that time, we have been through an acquisition. We are a lending tree company now, which I think brings a lot of great value. I climbed up the ranks as a salesperson, so I really like to think that that gives me a unique perspective on the industry. I've talked to thousands of insurance agents. As a salesperson, I love other salespeople. I think that's an important thing to keep me going every day. I started on the outbound sales team. I've worked the leads that come into QuoteWizard. I got into management at one point and found a real passion there, and have worked my way up to be the Director of Agent Sales. It's very fulfilling, and I love helping out insurance agents when it comes to growing their business, getting in front of more people, and really battling to make sure that mom and pop is still helping everybody out there, because that's the name of the game, I think.
100%. So you've sat in thousands of conversations with people like me, people like the people listening in, and you have heard, I hope, every excuse in the book, probably, right?
They've generally remained the same over the years. I think
Sure.
I think the product is pretty unique in that aspect. Everybody needs leads. You can go all the way back to the first salesperson of all time, and they've needed leads. They've needed people to get in front of. So I think it's really cool to be in an industry where you're helping other salespeople achieve their goals. But of course, that comes with, if you've ever seen Glenn Ross, right? They talk about the leads, and are the leads good? Are they helping me achieve my goals? So that's always the what we strive for at QuoteWizard. I really appreciate what we can do for our clients.
Yeah, 100%. Now, this podcast, I really want to bring content to our users, because I know there's probably been over 1 million Facebook posts. What do you think about QuoteWizard leads? What about this? Are they? And then it's so funny to watch people chime in, because you have two camps. You either have a camp that hates them with a passion, or you have another camp where people are scaling and growing their agency rapidly off of them, right? And it's something that I've watched for 13 years. I've grown my agency off of QuoteWizard leads. You guys have the best contact ratio out of any of the lead aggregators that I've found. So let's go into kind of like, what have you seen that makes an agent successful working your QuoteWizard leads?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting to listen to the first episode of this podcast. I made sure to do my homework and see the content that you're helping your user base out with. And I think that there are some solid suggestions on that first one. I have seen plenty of agents go through, and like you said, it's something that is a little bit polarizing in the industry, and that's okay. What I tell people when I onboard them at QuoteWizard, because I've trained a lot of people to do our job here, not a ton of folks in I would say any sales industry wake up in the morning and say, I just really want to buy some internet leads today, right? And that's okay. That really is okay. I think that if you're going to go for your highest closing sources, you're going to want those referrals. You're going to want people coming into you. You're going to want to build your brand so that when people think, I need insurance to protect my family, to protect my car, to protect my dog at this point, right? There's insurance for everything, that they think of you first. So that's why you're going to see your billboards out there. That's why they tell you to go after your natural market the second that you step in the door, right? That's going to be people who are willing to hear you out from the get-go. these days the game has changed a little bit, and I don't think anybody's really bashful to say that it's been harder for the brick and mortars, the mom and pops, the people who, whether they go captive, whether they go indie, the people who are trying to build their brands versus these huge multi-conglomerate. I'm not going to name any names, but you've seen commercials for them if you've ever watched TV, right? And I think everybody's stepping into that game. So in terms of like the very, very basics, I would suggest go through and listen to episode 1 of this podcast if you want to truly learn some of the fundamental secrets of what it takes to be successful with internet leads. Their advice on that was treat every single one of them the same, and that attitude really, really goes somewhere. I think I hate to be a little bit cheesy, but the power of positive thinking is a real factor in our industry, right? And I see it on my team too. We get our leads from a bunch of different sources, and when somebody sees SEO on that source, search engine optimization, meaning somebody came through the funnel and went directly to us, it's probably going to be a little bit different than if they see that they came through a partner affiliate that could be running some content that you don't quite know the messaging on. So that's really like the fundamental there. One thing go ahead.
Yeah, I want to hit on that when you were talking about SEO versus partner affiliate. That's, I think, setting expectations for insurance agents and when they're getting into lead aggregated online is pretty important. As far as you're generating interest for the agents, right? That's the lead. And you don't control partner affiliates. You don't know what the messaging was. So as long as agents understand that you have certain filters and criteria that you're promising to us that we're buying from, and of course there's refunds if somebody said, no, I was playing a video game and I don't know how the hell you got a hold of me, right? That's different than, no, I was curious what my rate is, right? Doesn't mean somebody said, oh, I have to buy insurance today. A curious person is a person that lives in the zip code that you wanted to buy, and they're a consumer that if they don't buy it today, they might buy it in the future, right? So I always tell agents, set your expectations that these aren't people that are like begging, knocking down your door to buy insurance from you, but what you're doing is building a data set of consumers around you that you're going to have and you're going to own because you bought the lead, right? And at some point, you can go back to these people. So just making sure people have expectations set properly. That's one of the biggest knocks I see on Facebook is where people say, oh, I bought 10 leads and 3 of them said, I don't know how you got a hold of me. Oh, by the way, I sold one, but the other 9, I did. I'm like, are you kidding me? A 10% closing ratio on internet leads? So expectations is everything, I think, when you're getting into dabbling into internet leads.
Yeah, I think one really key thing, and this is why it's so hard to be a small business owner, I think, is the amount of hats that you are expected to wear is enormous, right? So one day you're a sales manager, the next day you're a recruiter, the day after that you're the HR guy, and hey, what do you know, dabble in some marketing in there. It's a lot of responsibility. So really drawing the line at what am I capable of doing my best, and I want to focus on that. So I don't expect every client that comes through the door to know what SEO is or know what SEM is, and that's okay because it's really a hard game to get into, especially on a state level. I think every agent out there should 100% focus on making sure that they're on Google Maps and they're running some Facebook ads that might be targeted to people in their geo. But when it comes to, like I'm in the state of Washington, right? So if somebody's going after the Seattle market, that's one thing. If they want to go after the other side of the state, it's a whole other thing where their brand might not be as powerful. So where do you really draw that line? And are you a marketing expert? Do you want to hire one? And just kind of like making sure that the expectations are clear on that aspect. And I think you talked to some good things where every lead company out there is going to have a return policy, and that's really because it's the internet and anybody has access to the internet. So you're going to get a myriad of different people who come through the pipeline. The one thing that we do know for sure, and probably the reason why a lot of your listeners are in on this industry, is insurance is just something that you need, If you are in the United States of America and you drive a vehicle, you have to have insurance. The majority of mortgage companies, if you got a mortgage for your home, which I would assume is the vast majority of homes out there have a mortgage on them, you probably have to have home insurance. So it's recession proof. It's something that is always going to be needed, and it keeps growing too. So really, like when it comes down to it, the audience just keeps growing. The way that they're interacting with us is changing in some pretty big ways.
How so?
Number one, mobile, I would say,
Yeah.
far and away, like focusing on making sure that you have a mobile experience that is conducive to helping your customers is huge. Recently, I've seen some reports that have shown the amount of mobile, desktop, and tablet users by age group, and it's pretty astounding. You would assume that the older group would still be interacting with companies like mine on their desktop, but they're not. It's actually largely going towards tablet. And then, of course, you talk about your younger consumers, far and away, the vast majority of interactions that they're having with insurance companies online are through their phone. So that really changes the game. Now, the good side is when they're on their phone, they should be able to take a call from you. The downside of that is, are they willing to? When they go and take a look at it, what are they most likely to respond to? It's usually SMS, it's usually email. So I think that's a huge part that there's so much opportunity to make sure that you're interacting well via SMS and email.
100%. So with Agency MVP, our very first thing that we preach to agents is setting up your automation. So when a new QuoteWizard lead comes in, you're instantly texting them. And, we have some of our scripts in the Insurance Think Tank. People can go into the files section, join our Insurance Think Tank group on Facebook, and get our scripts. But it's something to the effect of, hey, Mr. and Miss Smith, this is Todd McLean, and I'm working on your quote. Love to save you some money. How would you prefer to receive this, by text or email? Right? I'm paraphrasing. It sounds way better than that. But it's funny you said that, because about 80% of our responses when we ask the consumer how they'd like to receive their quote, about 80% of the time it's text. And so being able in MVP to be able to send them a link via text and have a mobile-friendly version of a quote or a quote comparison of their current company versus the company we're offering them, it's really powerful. And so I agree wholeheartedly that if your experience for the consumer isn't mobile-friendly, and if you're not able to get them on the phone, you're still mobile friendly, right? You're still being able to send them something that they can play with on their phone. It's really important.
Yeah, agreed. It's so easy for a consumer to, if they don't get that instant gratification, to go somewhere where they can.
Right.
There's a lot of direct writers out there, and they are willing to take the easy route to get that. Does it cover them at the right coverages? Is it really truly in their best interest? That's really up to them, I would say. But in the numerous conversations that I have had with insurance agents throughout my 8 years, they tend to say that they don't. I can tell you anecdotally, I probably would not have an umbrella policy if it weren't for my insurance agent who told me that I should. It's not something that any online form would have told me that I did. I had to spend time on the phone and talk to them and really dive deep on why it was something of value. Hey, also it's inexpensive, right? So, like I said, I'm a sucker for salespeople, but it is something of value for my family. And again, every time that I went to an online site to check, it was never something that was suggested to me because they don't ask those questions.
Yeah. So through your years of talking to thousands of agents, I'm curious, are there any elements of the conversation or are they doing... Let's kind of compartmentalize the ones that you've seen quit pretty quick and the ones that are scaling their agency. What kind of systems are in place that you've seen them that makes them successful and continue buying more and more leads from you? What would you say you've seen work out there?
Yeah. So I actually, in preparation for this, I went and talked to a few of my account managers who manage our top 10% of clients because they have a really unique perspective on the industry. There's plenty of agents purchasing leads out there, and that's known. The ones who are doing it on the largest scale, again, you can segment them out to almost be like a different beast, right? So I want to make sure that there's different tiers of it. So I would say like the top 10%, you are seldom going to see somebody who is not using some form of sales automation software. And I'll tell you as well, my team does it too. We have our own sales automation software to make sure that everybody's sticking up on their cadence. Especially now, I think it's almost more important than ever. It always was, really, but as we've seen over the past year, a lot of people are going to the corners of the earth to find talent, and it's really a employees market. So
Right.
I've seen a lot of insurance agents who are like, as long as you're licensed in my state, I'll hire you. But that adds another layer of how do you make sure that somebody's doing their job well, one of your producers, if you're not there to look over their shoulder. And it's a huge struggle for a lot of people. I think we all struggled with that over the past year, if you manage any salespeople.
Oh, for sure.
Having a system in place to make sure that you can track and set expectations is of the utmost importance at this point. And again, like I said, our top 10% of clients, you're not really going to find one who's not using that. I would say you probably go to our top 30% of clients and you're seldom going to find somebody who isn't using that. So, that's something that's just really important for every agent to think about. You can do it old school. You're probably not going to have the legs up that people who choose to invest a little more heavily are going to have.
Well, and you're also going to think about it. Yeah. How many agents do you guys sell a lead to in the area?
Yeah, so we'll sell to a maximum of 4 agents.
Okay, so if you think about it, in this 2021,
Mm-hmm.
out of 4 agents, and let's say your top 10 you're dealing with here, because those top 10% are buying a big number of leads, there's a good chance that you're competing with one of those top 10% in your market. If they're using automation and you're not, who's going to get a hold of them first? Right? I can't agree more. I know just from Agency MVP's automation tracks that within the first 24 hours of me sending out 2 text messages, it increases our contact rate by 34%. And you're right, it is an employee's market. And the best possible thing ever is automation that works like an employee for you to get a consumer to raise their hand, didn't require any manual effort from any employee in your office, and you just increased your contact rate by 1/3, right? And if you're not doing it, one of the other 4 agents is, and you will lose, right? But I don't know why there's so much hesitation. I think to be honest, I'm going to piss off some agents here. Pure laziness. To just set it up, right, and to manage it and monitor it and improve its efficiency. Luckily for our users, we help set that up from the get-go. But if you're not using it, I hate to even say this to you, you probably shouldn't be buying internet leads until you're ready to set it up. I don't know if you go that far, but honestly, hey, you have to do it, right? In this day and age.
Yeah, I think the software is incredibly important. You kind of hit it there. I don't know if we see eye to eye in that you shouldn't be using leads if you don't have it, but it certainly does give you a leg up. Unless you could be just the most organized salesperson on earth, and there's plenty of you listening right now who are that person. But what I would say is, I talk to a lot of people on my sales team, and I'd say probably 40% of the prospects that we interact with, keep in mind we're interacting with you guys, they don't respond on the first day, right? So they went through our funnel and said, yeah, I'm thinking about buying some internet leads. What's going on here? What's the pricing? They won't respond to either an email or a text or a phone call on the first day. Now, that really jumps up. I would say 70% or more are going to reply within the first week. Now, you have to make sure that you don't give up. And I would just think it'd be super hard if you're trying to get in front of 5 to 10 prospects a day, if you're the average insurance agency out there. when you multiply that by the span of a week, count in a weekend that can throw you off your organization path, how are you making sure that somebody who came through your funnel last Tuesday is still getting the communication they need the Monday after? Because you don't know what happened with them. Things could have gotten crazy. I'm in Seattle, and we had a major heat wave yesterday that threw a lot of people off their track. Most of the restaurants in the area closed. And
Oh, wow.
I would assume that a lot of insurance agencies decided to either go remote that day or close up shop because it was just too hot. We don't have AC up here as much as other areas of the country. So on a day like that where you still have a sales goal, how do you make sure that anybody who came through your funnel that day is still getting what they need days later? So
Absolutely.
yeah, you're absolutely right in that respect.
Well, and something that I've noticed too is with QuoteWizard leads, I get my first 90 days, I have a 2% closing ratio, which ain't going to cut the ROI that I need. And what I found most agents do is they give up too fast with internet leads, because you're right, within the first 18 months, it goes from a 2% up 400% to an 8% closing ratio. Because I've actually found that about 40% of consumers don't respond in the first week. But again, that's because 3 other agents are competing with me on that lead. And a lot of those people go silent, right? They're like, oh crap, I have 3 other people calling my cell phone 5 times. Like, I'm just not going to answer the dang phone for a week or whatnot. But when we follow up with them 2 weeks later, 3 months later, 6 months later at the right time, because we're watching, something I recommend all agents do or buying leads is watch the underwriting in the household, look and see if they have any claims, or any teenagers, find opportune times, or let a system like MVP automatically do it for you. But find opportune times to reach out to the consumer, because you can make internet leads work if you don't give up, right? So I've always found that those people who say, oh, I tried it for a month, tried it for 3 months, and it didn't work, they didn't really try it out like they were supposed to. It's almost like they bought a lead list.
Yeah, it's important to number one, make sure that you're giving the appropriate sample size, but then also diversify your sourcing, right? I think something that would probably surprise a lot of people who might be listening today is the fact that most of my salespeople will suggest using multiple lead companies, not as a way, as like a gotcha or anything, but just find out what works for you. We've built a successful business model and we know that it works, so we're willing to do the Pepsi challenge, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people, if they need that extra convincing, like, they're there for you. It's a free market and there are options. I'll also say too, I really love what you said about making sure that you're keeping up on the underwriting. I'll tell you that in the past 6 months, I bought a vehicle, and one agent in particular noticed. Right? And I've gotten plenty of quotes over the past few years. One agent noticed and sent me a quote, and I ended up switching. So,
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about following up at the right time to convert a data. I say to all the agents out there, you're buying these leads, one, to try to sell them, right? You want to make money, but the people live in your area, right? You're a business. Data is the most important thing to a business. And if you're not treating it like the most important thing, you're in the wrong business, because it's such a competitive one, right? And so things like people buying cars, all sorts of underwriting elements where if you have a leg up on your competitor, you're going to be converting these cheap leads. Like, internet leads are the cheapest lead source, customer acquisition costs possible, versus all the other elements that are out there. You mentioned a billboard earlier, or, telemarketing. There's just so many ways that you can generate leads and convert later on down the road. I think that's the one I always preach to all my agents that listen to me is, look, don't give up on these leads. The person still probably lives at that house. They still probably drive that car. Eventually they're going to, answer the phone or respond to a text or whatever the case may be. They have to have insurance. Do not give up, right? And so, and that they were interested in shopping online, which is, they have high intent, versus some random Cole X Dates lead list you bought and you're going to go telemarket it and they don't know you from Adam. Right? So what other things out there have you found that kind of separates the the agents who don't make it versus the ones that do. Any other elements that you can think of?
Far and away, I would say another huge thing that I hear with just so many clients out there is finding producers, right? I think that's always a huge struggle for agents out there to find the right producers who will do the right amount of work needed. And again, if you are able to set those expectations up well, I think that it could get a little bit easier to do that. For my team, making sure that they're equipped with the right things. We have a SharePoint folder, a Microsoft SharePoint folder to make sure that it has all the relevant documents in it. So if there's any need for ongoing training, they might not need in certain cases to ping their manager and ask, hey, I have a client who's asking for this. Do we do it? Making sure you have that file directory up. So, and I know that like indirectly relates. That's more of a retention play. Obviously, with salespeople, in order to retain them, the biggest factor is probably making sure that they're fairly compensated, but also making sure that they're satisfied with their job and they're not thinking, hey, I could go work for the other guy down the street who's going to equip me better to make more money. So, that's definitely a pain point that I hear from a lot of customers that doesn't have a super easy answer, right? Like recruiting is very hard. I think it's one of the hardest aspects of business in general is recruitment.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, a producer that you're hiring in and recruiting to start. What I've noticed, and I remember this because I literally just read a Facebook post before we started this. An agent was saying he hired a producer, they start next week. What internet lead company should they buy leads from? And my response to him, because I'm a smart ass, I said, tell me about the systems that you set up with the lead companies you're already buying from. And he goes, oh, I haven't ever bought leads ever. And immediately in my mind, I just saw the cluster bomb that was about to happen to his brand new producer and the headaches they were about to experience. Because I always tell agents, do not just hire a brand new person off the street and just throw internet leads in front of them. One, they're one of the hardest amount of effort leads that you got to put into versus some referral calling you from a mortgage broker, right? There's a lot of effort. There's systems and processes that you have to establish and face, like a lead management system, automation. There's a lot of trial and error that has to be built there, right? And learning curve that needs to happen. So I always warn agents, like if you know a producer starting in 2 weeks, you should be buying leads today, and you as the agent should be establishing that workflow, that process, set expectations, set goals, results, track those things so that you don't hire a new producer in and think they suck. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. I think training is a huge aspect of that. Making sure there's recorded phone calls. I think you could alleviate that pain point a little bit by, like you said, purchasing a little bit in advance, giving some of those to somebody who may be more adept at working them. And one of the first things that you do with that new employee when they come in the door is say, I'm going to ease you into this process. Here's a couple of recorded calls that you could listen to where one of my existing folks interacted with them. And that's a good blueprint. I think there's always a snag of everybody has a different sales style. So
Sure.
I think in Seattle, right, the big anecdote is Edgar Martinez was the hitting coach for a bit. And Edgar Martinez can't just go to every Seattle Mariner and say, go hit the ball like me. And if he was able to do that, we probably wouldn't be the worst team in the league all the time. But so you can't necessarily just say, just do what I do, right? But you can provide that blueprint, that talk track that they need to be more successful with it. So the ongoing training aspect is huge.
100%. Any other elements or things that you've heard, best practices that you can think of?
Let's see. I had a bunch of things that I had prepared for this. I think making sure that you're filling your pipeline consistently, but also not overfilling it, right? Because you don't want to drop anything on the floor. I'll go back one step too. Probably like one thing that's been really successful for me is making sure that my salespeople are reading and constantly getting better and investing in their own success. So if you have that budget to do things like start a book club for your company, I think that's great. There's one book in particular called Fanatical Prospecting that I think really plays into this conversation, because it's all about keeping that pipeline full. Don't overwhelm yourself, really. If you aren't heavily invested in systems, maybe go for, trying to do 2 or 3 leads a day. I think somebody with the right systems in place can go 5 or more leads a day per producer and really ramp that up. You can't just go directly into hyper growth mode if you don't have it figured out. I think too many companies try to scale too quickly, and it results in some bad things. So making sure that you're patient in that aspect is such a key thing. Everybody's experienced that before. And it's really hard because in sales, you want to make sure that you're scaling as quickly as possible. And sometimes that isn't as beneficial as it seems. Plenty of people can do it. I've seen it go the opposite way too. Make sure that you have it down to a science and consume everything, right? This podcast is a great example. Making sure that you're connected. I use Reddit. I go on Reddit for the sales subreddit, and I make sure that I monitor the insurance agent subreddit too as a fly on the wall. If you don't know your potential audience, you're not going to do well. So every little bit helps.
I noticed that you were talking. I noticed with my staff, overloading them with too many internet leads. I've made that mistake way too many times in the past before I had a system that would track everything. And what I noticed is I wasn't trying to find the root cause of a problem. And it wasn't necessarily that my team couldn't handle the incoming leads, but I had the wrong roles and the wrong setup. For example, I wanted to buy 10 leads per day per producer. But what I was finding is they weren't able to call them enough times, or they would get backed up. And I found that, well, hey, instead of a producer calling these internet leads, I just need a telemarketer. So a telemarketer in-house, all they're doing is calling internet leads, gathering information, starting the quote all day long. That's their only job. And that really teed up my producers to only make sales calls. So they were only calling back people with quotes. So I think really, really important for agents to identify those bottlenecks and things that are going on within their office, and then really adapting to how their office is set up and their team that they have in place.
Yeah, you told me your accolades before, and they're impressive. I think that you do the right thing in terms of, I said it at the beginning of the podcast here, make sure that you identify what people do well and give them every at-bat to make sure that they have an opportunity to do that well, and that plays directly into it. So
awesome.
It's something that you can replicate.
Any other things that you had written down?
I could go into what my team uses in terms of systems. I think it's what everybody else should be doing. We've kind of already touched on it. Using text messages, making sure you have dynamic email templates that you can personalize something very easily, because you don't want somebody taking 30 minutes per email. Otherwise, that's going to eat up a large chunk of their day. Having a sales cadence, making sure that if people are coming through your funnel, you can drop it on somebody's calendar immediately. That's something that's super valuable for us. So I'm really big on it. I think being a student of the industry, I try to make sure I keep up on my industry knowledge. It seems to be where everybody is going. I think I've seen some interesting articles from some insurtechs that they want to put the mom and pop out of business, and I don't think they're really able to do that. I think that's a very lofty goal considering how many of you there are, and you guys are getting better and better equipped every day to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think insurance agents, because I know all the insurtechs, and I've talked to quite a few of them. You're 100% right. They want to put all the insurance agents out of business, but as long as the insurance agents have the relationship with the consumers, they have the systems set up in place, and they have a team who's hungry, we ain't going nowhere, right? Things are going to get tight, right? Carriers might reduce commissions, they might have bonus for new business up front, increase carrier bonuses for profitability. It's just as technology gets more and more advanced, things are going to get tighter, and that just means that agents need to stay on top of what's going on in the industry. And and try to improve every single day. But other than that, we ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, and buddy up with people who can help you along the way. The importance of a network, whether it be just your personal connections or businesses that you enjoy working with. If you can find those businesses that help make your job easier, and on the way you can help them succeed too by using them, it's the perfect relationship.
Nice. Hey, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the Insurance Agents Think Tank podcast. And again, everybody, you can check us out in this episode and many others at the Insurance Agents Think Tank or agentsthinktank.com. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd.